What up, what up, what up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Tian. This is 1 hour of commercial-free talk on the NFL draft, and everything related to the New England Patriots. We're so glad you're here with us. Popping in, joining me as always is the Hedge Better CEO himself, the man, Justin Fine. Justin, what is going on, my friend? How are you? 7 days before the NFL draft.
7 days, lot still up in the air, lot still happening. I mean, just even today, I'm hearing Shedeur Sanders going to the Giants. There's still, I think, a lot of last minute things that can come to fruition. It's exciting, very exciting.
It's an exciting time. It's a fun time. It is the lying season in the NFL. So don't believe anything you hear, because I guarantee you, however confident the football public is at large that something is going to happen, I guarantee you there's a time where something like that has ended up being totally wrong and false. Totally. So don't believe anything you hear the next few days and week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about having a poker face at this point, right? Like these GMs are trying to game each other, it
is. And everyone's trying to leverage each other, and you never know what, there's no such thing as never. I don't care who you are. If a right offer comes along, you could be totally committed to something. If the right offer comes along, a team will take that offer. And I'm sorry, I don't think there's one player in this draft that I would say is 1000%. You absolutely have to draft that guy. This is not that kind of year.
I totally agree. And actually, spoiler alert, I know we're going to get to our mock draft. That's actually one of the reasons why, the way I have it playing out, I don't even have any trades in this top 14, because I really think the way it's going to shake out, there aren't too many guys that at these positions that teams are going to need to trade up for.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first year in NFL history that all 32 teams have their first round pick still. Not one of these picks has been swapped yet, ever. It's never happened before. And it is because I think a little bit of the way this draft is structured, and we'll get into that. We have a great episode planned for everyone out there. We're going to do our 14 pick mock draft. Why 14 picks? Because I just felt like it started getting boring after pick 14. So we're going to stop at 14. That's the Colts, but we're going to go pick by pick. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Pats and some of the things going on with there. We haven't even discussed the Joe Milton trade yet, so we will get into that. We're going to talk about who's making this pick in Foxborough and all that, and we're going to talk about a few things around the league if we have time left. But Justin, if you're ready, I think we should just get right into it and start with our mock drafts and the Tennessee Titans on the clock.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump right in.
All right, so let me just say this. I'll start with this. Tennessee Titans, number 1 pick. This is what I find strange about this situation with the Titans. Everybody in the world thinks they're taking Cam Ward with this pick. The odds are like minus 5,000 or 4,000 on DraftKings. 2 weeks before the combine, the Titans GM was saying, we're not going to force a quarterback. We're not passing on a generational talent to take a quarterback. Now, all of a sudden, it's been Cam Ward. I have the Titans picking Cam Ward in my mock draft, but I have to say, I would not be surprised if all of this is a smokescreen and something funny happens with that number 1 pick, either a trade or the Titans taking someone else. I just feel like it's almost all too hunky-dory for a player that, frankly, wasn't that good last year.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, the other thing is, you look at it in the other 2 quarterbacks behind him, Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart, they kind of have some flaws, and I don't think they're held in that high of a regard, or at least in high regard as some of the quarterbacks we've seen in prior draft classes. And so, Cam Ward is kind of being held as the quarterback to draft. And I think the Titans are covering all their bases by, at this point saying that, hey, if there's a guy that's worth trading up for, it's him and him alone. And they hold the keys with that number 1 pick. And I think they're interested to see who would come and get it, because there are a couple teams that are desperate for quarterback. But ultimately, I do have them picking Cam Ward as well. I do think they take him. I heard Cam Ward the other day talking about, he was naming like Calvin Ridley, and I forget Treylon Burks is like 2 of his top 4 receivers in the NFL. And he said Tony Pollard's the best running back in the NFL. Like, he's all bought in. Like, he's sipping the Titans Kool-Aid, and he's repping for, I think, his future franchise.
I just feel like, what did Cam Ward do to it last year to be the undisputed number one pick this year. Like, I don't think he even had
No.
a great year. Like, you go back to last year's draft, everyone knew Caleb Williams was hype, whether you agree with it or not. We all knew he was hyped. Everyone knew Drake May was going to be a top 5 pick going into his senior year, or his junior year, I should say. He was hyped. Jalen Daniels kind of came out of nowhere, but he also had a monster season in his last year at LSU. What did Cam Ward do in college to make him the undisputed number one? I think he was up and down at Miami last year. I think he has a lot of bad habits. I don't believe in the player. I should say that. I think this is more a case of any port in a storm, whereas teams are so desperate for a quarterback that they're just kind of jumping on the only guy that maybe has a chance. But I really feel like the Titans might be trying to just drive up a lot of interest in this to see if someone does take the cheese. And then if not, they maybe will end up still taking him.
Yeah. I mean, I think Cam Ward is more of an Anthony Richardson than a Cam Newton, to be completely honest. I'm not super sold on him. I do think, however, though, if there was a guy that you were going to take a chance on at quarterback in this draft class, it probably is him. But with that being said, like, in no means do I think he's a lock. In no means do I don't think he's a sure thing at all. And look, this might be just a situation, like you said, of the Titans trying to drive that asking price up and see who comes knocking. But you know what? At the end of the day, I think you can't fault them if they do take him, because they do need a quarterback, and he's the best quarterback available.
I will say this too, Justin. I have Cam Ward number one in my mock, but I also did place a bet on Abdul Carter being taken with the number one pick, just in case something funny happens, because actually pretty good odds for Abdul Carter to go number one. So I took a chance, but yes, I took Cam Ward number one. It sounds like you have the same.
I did. Yep. Exactly.
All right. Browns are on the clock. Tell us who you pick.
Yeah, I don't think it's a super surprise here. I think they take Travis Hunter. I think he's the best player available at that point. And, they just re-signed Myles Garrett. They need some weapons. They need a spark. And I think Travis Hunter is the type of guy that they could bring in and get some significant value on day one.
Yeah, it feels like the Browns are in love with Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
Is what it feels. I feel like it feels real, and that could be wrong. Right. Like I said, you can't believe anything this time of year, but I think that's a franchise that's desperate for star power, desperate for some offensive playmaking and offensive firepower. And Hunter is and will probably be the highest regarded player available. I'll say this about Hunter, and I don't know how you feel about this. I don't even know if I would want Travis Hunter anymore. And I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I don't think he's a great fit for the Patriots because, first of all, I think he's going to be a better corner at the NFL level than receiver. And corner is really not a position in need right now in Foxborough. Yeah. So that's number one. And number two, I'm all set with having to navigate around all this two-play BS. And when he comes out and says, I'm not going to play unless I can play both ways, that just sounds like it's really complicated. That's a lot different than saying, I'm okay with playing mostly one, but I'll play a little other. It's like, I just feel like it's super complicated. I don't think he will be a wide receiver, a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver at the NFL level. He probably will be a Pro Bowl caliber cornerback. I'm okay with him not coming to Foxborough.
Yeah, I'm okay with him not going to Foxborough. I do like him. I do think he's talented. I think just from a pure athleticism standpoint, I think he has a gear, a level of movement, athleticism, agility that is very almost like Tyreek Hill-esque, right? You don't see a lot of guys with that. But with that being said, you know what? I don't think it's make or break that he comes to New England. And, if he wants to play two ways, look, it'd be super cool to have a guy that can consistently play meaningful two-way snaps in the NFL. But it's a big risk you're taking, big risk. And like you said, cornerback's not a position to need right now. So.
Yeah. And then you draft this guy and he's let's say he becomes an all-pro Darrelle Revis type cornerback. Yeah. And he's really just a below average receiver, hypothetically. Right. And now you're in a position where you have to navigate this. I want to play receiver. And that him developing into the best corner he can be requires him giving up wide receiver entirely. Yeah. It's just going to be very complicated. And I honestly can see why a lot of teams wouldn't even want to deal with it. But like I said, I do believe the Browns will take him here because I do think they seem to be very interested in him. But I'm completely okay with him not making it to the Patriots at 4.
Yeah, and I don't expect him to. I expect him to be gone by the time he gets to the Patriots.
He's not the best fit for what the Pats need, I personally think. Okay, number 3, Giants. Justin, what do you got?
All right, this to me, I think, was personally my most interesting, pick here. In I'm going to tell you why. And this, I think, sets the tone for the rest of my top 14 and why I don't think there's going to be any trades. I think the Giants are going to take Shedeur Sanders. I do, and I got them. I got him going to New York in my mock, and here's why. Brian Daboll and the GM are coaching in managing for their jobs right now, right? Their jobs are on the line.
Yep.
And you talk about the ability to come in and turn a franchise around. Abdul Carter may be an elite level player. He may be a surefire thing, but Abdul Carter is not going to come in and turn the Giants into a 10, 11 win franchise, right? We've seen what it takes in order to do that quickly. It takes a CJ Stroud. It takes a Jaden Daniels. It takes a talented quarterback to come in and give a spark. And I think when you're coaching and managing for your job, the best chance they have of turning this team around is on hitting on a guy like Shedeur Sanders. Abdul Carter will outlast both of those guys if he goes to the Giants. But I think the best chance they have to keep their jobs is to turn things around quickly. And I think you have to do that with the quarterback. So I think they take Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I like Shedeur Sanders, and I think that honestly, I think you said if you had to take a chance on a quarterback, you'd take a chance on Cam Ward. I would take Shedeur Sanders over Cam Ward. I like Shedeur Sanders better than Cam Ward. I like his skill set better. I think, I'm looking at a guy like Joe Burrow, who doesn't have like a rocket arm or terrific mobility, but has all the leadership and gets it and throws the ball well enough and is accurate, and he's lit up the league. And I think Shedeur Sanders reminds me a little bit of him in his skill set, frankly. So I like Shedeur Sanders, and I like that pick there. I think the Giants should take Shedeur Sanders at 3 for all the reasons you just illustrated. But I think the one thing you have to remember with this whole draft, Justin, and we have to say this, Arch Manning is looming super large for next year over a lot of these teams that need quarterbacks. Yeah. And don't forget that, like this is going to be like an Andrew Luck, John Elway type thing with Arch Manning coming out next year. And I wonder if the Giants might be playing the long game and maybe take a non-quarterback here just because they're probably looking towards bottoming out. I mean, they signed Jameis Winston. They signed Russell Wilson. What do you expect when you sign those guys? You expect below average at best. So I think the Giants are probably almost resigned to the fact that this is probably not their year. They're probably, I don't know if they believe in the player. It was interesting they had him in for a pre-draft visit this week. I don't know what to make of that. I think the Giants take Abdul Carter here, but I think they should take Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, and you know what? I think either way, I think the Giants are in a position where if those are their two options, I don't really think you could fault them for going in either direction. But the one thing I will say is, like, again, if they take Abdul Carter, which may be the more surefire pick, can you see any scenario in which Daboll and what's his name are back in 2026?
It's tough, but I don't think Daboll is making the pick. I think it's the GM, and I think the GM is on good footing. Am I wrong? I mean, he's only been there, I think, for 2 seasons. I
don't know. I mean, after that Saquon Barkley blunder, I mean, he took a lot of heat for that. I mean, he might, again, who knows what's going on internally. I could see him potentially having his behind to the flame a little bit.
When you see that Saquon Barkley thing, and like that is really a textbook like case of why teams should not want Hard Knocks in their building.
Yeah.
Because that is all like so well documented, and just like how grossly wrong he was about everything he said and did with that Saquon Barkley thing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, he got exposed, and I mean, look, yeah, I would be shocked if he wasn't in the hot seat a little bit. We know Daboll confirmed in the hot seat.
They are 100%.
But the GM, I wouldn't be too secure if I was him.
Could you imagine Arch Manning with the Giants? I mean, wouldn't that just be like the perfect fit?
Yeah, there would. I mean, honestly, the storyline kind of writes itself. You got another Manning in New York, and don't forget, and the Quinn Ewers kid too. I think the two of them are considered like neck and neck as far as being,
Yeah.
really really good prospects. I think next year is supposed to be a quarterback heavy draft class. I know the Lenora Sellers kid out of South Carolina. He's got a
Right.
lot of hype. Like there's a lot of good quarterbacks to be had next year.
There is. It's going to be a much stronger quarterback class. So
Yeah.
I mean, between all that, I think a lot of these teams are going to play the long game. So I got the Giants at 3 taking Abdul Carter. You got them taking Shador Sanders. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I mean, it's like you're rolling with Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. But think about it. If you're the Giants and you do bottom out this year, you got a pretty good base if you bring in a
Right.
young quarterback next year. I mean, you got a number one receiver in
Yep.
Malik Neighbors. It's funny because you look at this Giants team and how hard they traded up to try to trade up last year to get Drake May. And honestly, like, good for the Patriots for holding firm and picking May, because if the Patriots had traded and yeah, we have Malik Neighbors, great. You're still 2+ years away from a quarterback, which means you're still
Exactly.
2+ years away from winning anything.
Yep. Yeah. No, for sure. That honestly, in hindsight, yeah, it was a great decision because I would hate if the Patriots were sitting here having to go pick Cam Ward or
Right.
somebody like that.
Right. If they were in that desperate or
Yeah.
waiting again another full year and playing for Arch Manning or whoever
Right.
next year, I mean, that sucks. And that's why I think you look at that. That's why so many teams are so aggressive now in taking these quarterbacks, because if you do hit on one,
Hmm.
it changes everything. It
Yes,
changes everything.
it does for sure. For sure.
All right. That brings us to the Pats, Justin. This number 4 pick. We have talked about it. We have thought about it. We have dreamed about it. We have changed our minds 100 times. Who do you got the Patriots taking and why? What's the case?
So I mean, look, in the way I have it marked out, Abdul Carter happens to be available here, and if that's the case, I think the Patriots take Carter. I mean, we've heard they love him. I think he's the perfect fit for Mike Vrabel team, and I think it's something that would be super beneficial to this defense to bring in a young, top tier edge rusher. I think that's exactly what this front seven needs. So I would love if they took Abdul Carter. In this situation, though, if Abdul Carter wasn't available, if the Giants did take Abdul and it came down to it, I could see the Patriots trading out of the pick.
I'm sure the Patriots will love to trade out of this pick, even if Abdul Carter is there, right? I mean, if Abdul Carter falls to 4, this pick becomes valuable. I almost think that if he falls, you got a real decision on your hands, because then you might be able to get a pretty big yield for the 4 pick. You might be passing also on a franchise caliber defensive player.
Right. Right. I mean, uh, yeah, I'm assuming you got him taking Will Campbell here, right? And if that's the case,
Nope, I
no,
don't.
you don't have
Nope,
taken
I
Will
do
Campbell.
not. Nope.
Okay.
But let me ask you this: are you concerned about Carter's off-field stuff?
Uh, no, because I think you hear that a lot. You heard that about guys like what's his name? The guy, I'm drawing a blank, the Jalen Carter from Philadelphia, a couple of
Right.
these other guys, and they come in and they're superstars in the right scheme with the right team. And you got Mike Vrabel. I mean, he's a true leader. I'd take the chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it really comes down to, is he a good player? I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. They're not drafting choir boys here. If he can fit in the locker room
Right.
and he can play and he's not a total criminal,
Hmm.
obviously maybe he has some personality issues. Sometimes that stuff can be good for a
Yeah.
defense, a personality or two like that, to
Yeah.
bring that edge. I mean, a lot of the great defenses and teams in this league, they got a guy or two with the edge like that.
Yeah.
So it's not always the worst thing either. So I wouldn't pass on him for that. If Carter fell, it'd be hard to pass on him in my book. I would think about trading the pick because I feel like you could get a lot for it. I'm going to tell you what I think the Patriots do. I have Carter off the board on my board. I have,
Yep.
again, to recap, Ward, Hunter, and Carter going 1, 2, 3, puts the Patriots in a tough spot. To me, I look at, Justin, the straw that stirred the drink on the last 2 NFL dynasties, besides the quarterback, was a pass catching, versatile, flexible, tight end. That's
Interesting.
Travis Kelce for the Chiefs and Rob Gronkowski for the Pats. You have a young quarterback. You still lack, I think, a true number one target, number one dynamic offensive weapon. Maybe Diggs still has some of that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Tyler Warren could be that guy. By all accounts, Tyler Warren is probably the best player on the board at this point. He is a tight end. It is not a marquee position historically, but look at the NFL the last few years, the Chiefs, the Patriots. Tight end matters. If you have a tight end that can catch like a receiver and block like a lineman, that's a field tilting player. It helps with some of your blocking issues. It helps with some of your receiving issues.
Yeah.
For all those reasons, I think the Patriots should draft Tyler Warren if those three players are gone.
I like that. I do. I've heard rumblings, people saying that Tyler Warren's the best player available there. And you know what? It's tough to argue. I mean, it's very, look, this is an offense that we know they need weapons. So it's tough to say that if he's the best weapon available, that they should pass on him.
It is. And I mean, it's like, this is a different NFL, and tight end now is showing. I mean, look at the guy in Detroit too. What's his name there? Oh God, I'm drawing a blank. Laporta, right? These guys, it's a different league than it was. Tight end is sneaky becoming a marquee type position.
Yeah.
And this guy is I think, a special talent. And I think that's what the Patriots need to do. They need to fill up this roster. They need to use this pick to bring in a special talent.
You know what? And I'll tell you this: if the Patriots go out and draft Tyler Warren with the 4th pick, I won't be disappointed. I really won't be. I think that'll be. I think it's a good pick. I think it gives them options.
Yes.
Now, if you would ask me what's a more pressing position for the team, tackle or tight end, I would say tackle. But if you're asking me pound for pound, who's better at their position? Is Tyler Warren a better tight end, or is Will Campbell a better tackle? You probably got to say Will Campbell's a better tight end.
Yeah, Warren's a better tight end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, you got to draft the best player available because you have needs and you need high-end talent.
Yeah.
With one exception, and that's running back. Like, I don't want a running back this pick. I don't care how good they are, how good they're projected. That's just not applicable. It's the way this team is right now. So you can't take Ashton Genty here, even if you think he's better than Warren. So that leaves you with Tyler Warren. You take the best player available, and you're building elite talent, right? What has this roster lacked for so many years? It's been elite talent. Well, I think now you could argue if they pull Warren here, they would have 3 elite talents: Christian Gonzalez, Drake May, and Warren. That's a big step in the right direction from where they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. And you know what, I would almost venture to say that, if he really is a Gronkowski or a Travis Kelce like tight ends, I mean, I think he's every bit worth the risk.
Yeah.
I agree. I think if Abdul Carter is not there, he's probably one of the best options if you don't trade out of that pick.
He is, and he'll be a safety blanket for May, which is another thing that they desperately need. All right. Anything else about the Pats? We're gonna get back into what else we think they should do later in the draft, but later in the podcast. But that'll be one of the things we talk about. You want to move on to the Jaguars at 5?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's move on to the Jaguars.
All right, who you got at 5?
So I actually I know there's been a lot of talk about the Jaguars in Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. But I think, you know what, they're trying to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence, who has been an utter disappointment, throughout his career. He struggled big time. And, they just brought in an offensive minded coach in Cohen. And I think he's going to go offense. I think he's going to get some help for Trevor Lawrence. And I think he's going to take Will Campbell, who, if the Patriots pass up on him for some reason, I think falls to the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars take Will Campbell, and I think they try to give Trevor Lawrence some help.
The Jaguars have a lot of needs, and there's no question that supporting their young quarterback is like a priority for them. I wouldn't fault them if they took Will Campbell with that pick. I have them taking Jalen Walker I think that team was terrible on defense last year, and I think he's the best player available at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a team that has so many needs that, you can there's a bunch of players that you can plug in there and it makes sense for them.
I mean, the larger question is, what are they going to do with Trevor Lawrence, the albatross that he is? And like,
Yeah.
do you force it and take an offensive player to try to get the best out of Trevor Lawrence? At what point do you wash your hands of him and say, we just need to build a team and take the best player available? What point do you wash your hands of him and say, we need to build this defense because Trevor Lawrence isn't good enough to win games on offense?
I mean, I think quite frankly, I think you need both. I think they don't nearly have the caliber defense that they need to support, Trevor Lawrence in that offense. And by the same token, that's a pretty bare offense outside of a couple positions. I know they just drafted the Brian Thomas Jr. kid from LSU, who's really good. He had a great rookie year, and I expect him to keep being good. But that's an offense
Done.
but that's an offense that's pretty devoid of talent right now. And I think you got to give him some help on the line. I mean, his line is pretty desolate.
Yeah, I mean that's a good argument because I think they were at the top of the league in sacks as well.
They were, yeah. Yeah.
But I would argue that that's part of Trevor Lawrence's
That is
deficiencies.
exactly.
Like it's not, some quarterbacks, the way they play the game, they get sacked a lot. And I think that's Lawrence in the way he maybe doesn't read things well
Yeah.
and it holds onto the ball a little too long.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit on him.
I mean, you know how I feel about Trevor Lawrence, so I'm never gonna fight you on that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move to number 6, the Raiders. You want to make this one?
Sure. Yeah, I get I have the Raiders going out in taking Tet McMillan. I think they're totally bare at wide receiver. And if he's available there, I think they need to give Geno Smith and Pete Carroll a weapon to work with. They were when they were together, they had DK Metcalf, and by all accounts, he's a big-bodied, athletic receiver. I'm not super high on him personally. I just want to make that known. I don't have super high
Yeah.
expectations for him, but I could see him going to Vegas. He was out in Arizona. He's used to, I think, that climate, that area. I could see him fitting in Vegas.
See, I don't see Geno Smith as anything more than a bridge quarterback at
Right.
this point. And for that reason, I think the Raiders will take Shedeur Sanders at 6. I don't think Shedeur Sanders, and I know obviously you don't either.
Right.
I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to plummet the way that a lot of people do. And it would just go against the trend. Right. Bo Nix was going to be a second-round pick.
Right.
Anthony Richardson was going to be a second-round pick. Somebody will fall in love and take these quarterbacks because they need them. And I look at the relationship between Brady and Shedeur Sanders. We've been talking about it for 2 years. It's a marquee franchise, even though they've been terrible for like 30 years. It's Las Vegas.
Right.
Sanders will be able to handle the lights. He'll be relatively close to his father in Colorado. He'll have Brady's counsel and guidance. And that's a team that I still think is desperate for a franchise quarterback. So for all those reasons, I have them taking Sanders. And you're right that they're devoid of wide receiver, but they also do have 2 dynamic young tight ends, which will help if they do take a young quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, if I agree with you, I think if Shedeur Sanders is on the board, I think that's who the Raiders would take 100%. Cause I do think they need a quarterback, and they do have all those connections. And I think clearly they brought in, a guy like Pete Carroll for a reason, and they probably think he'd be good to develop a young quarterback if they were to land Shedeur.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good fit. And I think, Sanders is going to be able to handle the pressure. And I think we're forgetting that. I think we're all forgetting how important that is. You know what I mean? Like, because we do it every year. Everyone does it every year at this time. We get so caught up in arm strength and mobility and all this stuff. And then we forget what actually makes these guys successful and how much of it is emotional. I'll take the guy that has the good makeup. I said this last year for Drake May, and I think it bore somewhat true. And I'll say it again for Shedeur Sanders. Give me the guy that's got the intangibles and the makeup, and I feel like that guy is going to ultimately persevere. So I like Sanders at 6 there.
Yeah, and you know what? To that point, just before we move on, just when I think of Shador Sanders, we've talked a lot in the past, and this goes back to like the whole like Mac Jones and and some of the some of these quarterbacks that
Yes.
came from high profiled schools where they had NFL caliber rosters around them. They were never really like the focal point. They got a little too much credit, and they didn't have a
Right.
ton of the pressure on
Right.
them because of how good their team was. And Shador was the exact opposite. I can't think of a player who's had more of a spotlight, more pressure on him in the last 2 years than Shador Sanders. And he's done it and he's performed without being part of a powerhouse a powerhouse school in conference. So I'm like, you think about a kid who's done more with less and who's had more of a spotlight, an NFL type spotlight, NFL type pressure in media on his back than Shador Sanders. I mean, you can't tell. I can't think of too many quarterbacks.
It's true, and I mean, people, you could say that he had the Heisman winner with him, and that's true. But that Colorado program was dead in the water for like decades, and he made them. He made them into a respectable program overnight between him, Travis, and Deion Sanders. Literally, the entire nation has been like watching what's been happening with the Colorado program. And I would also say, Justin, just to get back to your mock draft, like that's why one of the things, if I was the Giants, I would like about him too. The Giants are a marquee franchise. They play in New York. Like Shador Sanders isn't going to be too big or too small for the spotlight. Like he's going to be able to handle that. You sure Arch Manning is going to be able to handle playing in New York, country boy? I mean, I know he's had a lot on him too, but you see my point. Like the New York market is a tough place to play. Yeah. That should be a check in favor of drafting Sanders for the Giants.
Yeah, exactly. So, I do think, we both think that he's going to go higher than he's projected right now. I've heard some people saying he could fall down to
second round.
Yeah, and I'm just like, get out of it. I've even heard people saying he could fall to like the Saints, but I don't even think he makes it that far. I don't think he makes it out of the top 7, honestly.
All right. Next up, let's go to the Jets. 7 pick. Who do you got?
So this is where I had Tyler Warren going. I think, the Jets, they have, what's his name? Garrett Wilson. They have Breece Hall, right? They don't have any tight end to speak of at all. If they could bring in Tyler Warren, that's a nice little trio of weapons if they were to bring in a top tier quarterback next year. So that's where I had him go. And I think that was a position of need for the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that because, and it's kind of along the same rationale with where I'm going. I got the Jets taking Will Campbell.
Yeah.
And I think this pick is going to potentially be a thorn in the Patriots side for a long time, passing on him in my mock draft. If they do pass on him, this guy's going to have a hair across his backside for his entire career because of what's been said about him over the last couple months. But I think the Jets at 7, I think it's okay for them to take Campbell and have him turn into just a nasty guard, if that's all he is. Like, I think that's okay for them because I think they just need to kind of build that offense up. I don't think the Jets are in it to win it this year. They're rolling with Justin Fields. I think they're another team that I would say is playing the long game and playing for a quarterback in the 2026 draft. The quarterback they need is probably not in this draft, not at the number 7 pick anyways. So I think you draft Campbell. He brings stability to that offensive line. And when they do go next year and find the quarterback that they need, or potentially, you have a much better, more stable offensive line.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't hate that at all. I think, but I think you're right. I think we're both kind of thinking like, hey, who can you bring in that will help whoever your first round quarterback is in 2026?
And oh, by the way, if you're looking to have like at least a respectable or somewhat respectable season this year, I mean, there are a couple good running backs on that Jets team. So bringing in a guard, a nasty guard, a lineman that can run block for what probably is going to be the biggest strength that you have on offense, I don't think that's a terrible pick on many levels. Definitely. All right, number 8, Justin, Panthers. What do you think?
This is where I had Jalen Walker going. I know the Panthers would trying to make moves to boost that defense. They were in on Milton Williams. They were in on some of these guys. They don't wind up going their way. I think if Jalen Walker fell there, I think that's where the Panthers would scoop him up at number 8.
Yeah. Again, thinking similarly, I have them taking Jahdae Barron, who is the top rated cornerback in this draft at 8. And I think that shockingly last year, the Panthers were actually quite good on offense at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And they were scoring points, and Bryce Young, like a light bulb went off over his head.
Right.
And It's going to be really interesting to see where Bryce Young lands this year. There are a lot of good weapons on the board here. I almost mocked Matthew Golden to the Panthers here because I think that would be intriguing if you gave Bryce Young, who I personally think is the best wide receiver in this draft.
Yeah.
But I also think the Panthers really struggled to stop people last year. Their defense was awful, and I think they need to fortify that defense. Bringing in a likely number one cornerback is going to help. They actually do have, I think, one really good cornerback already on that roster, but I think they need to bring in defensive talent.
Yes, yeah, I know who you're talking about. His name's escaping me, but J.C. Horn.
J.C. Horn.
Yeah,
yep.
That's who it is. So yeah, that'd be a nice little dynamic duo back there. But you're right, they definitely need to improve that defense, and I think there's going to be a couple of good defensive players that fall to them there. So yeah, yeah, all the pressure in the world though. This is a big make or break year for Bryce Young. I mean, I think after his rookie year, totally wrote the guy off. I mean, makes or sorry, towards the second half of last year, he kind of revives it a little bit. And I think it really comes down to this, like, I think it's put up or shut up time for him. So, build a defense around him. Let him
I mean, the guy got benched for Andy Dalton for like 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he might have not have seen the field again if Dalton didn't get hurt.
Seriously. So,
all right. So 9, the Saints, I'm looking at this. I think the Saints are a team that you might see trade up to 4 with the Patriots, depending on who's there.
Yes.
If a quarterback is there. Derek Carr might be out for the year, is the news that broke this week. The Saints need a young quarterback anyways. I know Spencer Rattler was a guy a lot of people liked last year. He did play some this year. I didn't see it. I would not hang my hat on him developing into anything more than a backup. You look at the trend in this league the last few years, we've seen it how many drafts in a row. Somebody has reached for a quarterback that was way sooner than we all thought it was going to be. To me, that's the Saints right here. I have them taking Jackson Dart with the number 9 pick, a la Bo Nix and the Broncos last year.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought, I thought about Jackson Dart going here. And to be honest, if Shedeur Sanders fell to number 4, I probably would have mocked up something where the Patriots maybe try to work in like a deal for like a Chris Olave and maybe a future pick and swap that number 4 with the Saints, right? But I do think the Saints need to address offense. I was between Jackson Dart and who I think is one of the top offensive tackles, which I think the Saints also need. They got Kellen Moore now running the show, offensive minded guy. I have them taking Armin Membu.
Yeah, that's a reasonable pick there. I mean, I don't know who's going to play quarterback for them if they go tackle. Honestly, like I don't know if Rattler is really cut out to be a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, and I've heard that. I've heard a lot of people say, he just needs a chance. Maybe it's one of those situations where you bring in a stalwart tackle for him, you give him a chance, and worst case scenario, you wind up with a high draft pick, able to get one of those big names next year because clearly they want a quarterback. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I agree with you. I could see some sort of trade in the works to move up.
And by the way, Jackson Dart is kind of like a hometown boy for New Orleans. Don't forget
he's
about
an Ole Miss, right? Yeah,
he's the Ole Miss guy, right? So he's a southern boy that I would think would be a good fit for quintessential Southern franchise.
Yeah, I could totally see them moving up and taking them there.
All right, 10 Chicago Bears. What do you think?
This is where I got Ashton Jeanty going. I think, I think, what's his name? He came from Detroit, where they had arguably the best running attack in the NFL, right? And that was not by accident. They had 2 elite running backs. You look at that Bears team. They've done a lot to rebuild that offense, the offensive line. They obviously brought Caleb Williams in. They got him a slew of weapons. I think if they could put together an elite running back out there, that would kind of be the missing piece of that puzzle. And I think it's the perfect offense over their offensive scheme.
We're thinking the same way. I mean, clearly the Bears have shown that they are willing to make moves and take chances to build the best possible team around Caleb Williams. I mean, that's the goal. Like they're trying to do everything they can to support Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
And I thought about Matthew Golden here again, but I just think they took Rome Odunze last year. I don't think they'll go receiver again. I actually have Armand Membo going here to the Bears. I
Okay.
still think there's room on that offensive line for a stud tackle. I think that, they clearly want to protect Williams. Williams got clobbered and destroyed. I know they brought in, I think, two linemen in free agency they signed.
Yeah.
But I think a player like Membo could really stabilize that offensive line. I also think that Williams, the way he plays the game, he is one of the big reasons he gets sacked so much because Caleb Williams gets sacked so much because of Caleb Williams.
Right.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the Bears think that. And I think they'll bring in Membu. This is a great landing spot for Genty. You're right. That would be exciting if Genty and Caleb Williams, two of the best, biggest name players in college in the last 5 years, ended up on the same NFL team. I mean, that would be exciting.
Yeah.
So that would be good too. And that would certainly be supporting him. So that might make sense. But I went Membu here.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement though that I think Ben Johnson wants to beef up that offense and give what's his name,
right,
the best possible chance to go out and succeed.
Right, and that needs to be said too. I mean, Ben Johnson, look how Detroit drafted, how aggressive they were in bringing in offensive weapons. So now that you say it, it's true. Like this would be a great landing spot for Genty, and I mean the Bears also 2 years ago reached for Jahmyr Gibbs, which everyone thought he was going to be a second round pick. And I think they took him at 12 or something like that.
Six. I think they took him like 6.
It was even higher. Right. And I guess that kind of worked out. I mean, okay, let's go to 11 49ers. Justin, what do you think here?
This is a team that I think has lost a lot. And particularly on the defensive side of the ball. So I had them going Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M.
Yeah. He's a hot name. He's a combine riser and like a kind of pre-draft kind of riser.
Yeah.
And he kind of checks all the boxes physically. I think, look, you got Brock Purdy as your quarterback. I think we all know that Brock Purdy needs a lot of support around him. He can be a good quarterback, but he needs that talent. You've lost Deebo Samuel. I think they made a huge mistake signing Brandon Ayuk, and not just because of the injury. I don't know if I believe in the player. I'm not sure he's a number one receiver. The best wide receiver in this draft class, in my opinion, is still on the board in my mock here for the 49ers. I think they take him. That's Matthew Golden. Yeah. You want to support Brock Purdy. Your quintessential mediocre kind of quarterback with that A-level talent around him. This is that opportunity for the Niners. So I think they'll take Golden here. And I love Matthew Golden. I think he's going to be the best receiver that comes out of this draft.
Yeah. I like Matthew Golden. I think that's definitely a good fit in the Shanahan offense. Like you said, they've lost a couple weapons. Again, the 49ers are one of those teams that I think they've lost a lot more than I think people realize. And there's a lot of spots on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball that they really need a playmaker. So I could totally see them. This is one of those teams I could see them going offense just as easy as defense. You know what I mean?
They've lost a lot and they've also aged.
Yes.
A lot of their best players are past in their prime. I mean, that includes Bosa on defense, right? Which is why I think you're thinking they'll take a defensive end. George Kittle is getting older.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Trent McCaffrey, Williams, how much longer does he got, right? It's
Trent Williams is at the end. McCaffrey's at the end.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel's gone now.
Right. Yeah.
And they're young. The only guy in that group that's young is coming off an ACL tear.
Exactly.
So you're right. I mean, definitely a lot of needs on that roster, very suddenly, very quietly. And this year is going to be a real test for Brock Purdy. Can you do it when you're not surrounded by a bunch of Pro Bowlers?
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't have high expectations for the 49ers this year. I really don't. But this is a pivotal year for them because that window is definitely closing. And I think this is either going to be the year that the book closes or they find a way to somehow extend that window. But it's going to take a lot. They still got a lot of holes to fill.
I mean, it kind of doesn't it feel like the window's closed?
I think so.
I don't know.
I think so. But they maybe the way they look at it is as long as some of these names are still in the roster, you got a chance in any given game. But I agree. I think the window's closed personally.
How old is Christian McCaffrey now? I'm going to look it up.
I mean, I think he's got to be almost
30. 28. He's 28.
He's 28. Okay.
So 30 is the cliff.
Yeah.
Right. For running backs. He's 28. But he's a lot of miles on him though, too.
A lot of miles and a lengthy injury history.
Right. Exactly. I mean, this is another place where Ashton Genty, if he is still available, might not be the worst idea in the world
Yeah.
either, right? Like this is Kyle Shanahan's MO. Guy loves to run the ball.
Yeah.
McCaffrey, I don't know how much longer it lasts for. I don't know. It's crazier things have happened. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up there.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
All right, 12 Dallas Cowboys. What do you got? You talk
So
about a team with a lot of needs, by the way.
a ton of needs. This is where I got the wide receiver from Texas, Matthew Golden, going. If he somehow falls to this spot, I think he's a lock for the Cowboys. You know, kid played his college ball in Texas. The Cowboys definitely need some help in a lot of different areas, and I think another compliment to CeeDee Lamb would be huge for them. But there's so many positions of need on this Cowboys roster that, again, this is one that I just think is a total wild card.
See, I go both ways on that one, and I'm going to tell you why. Dak Prescott was at his best when he had two really good receivers around him, when he had Amari Cooper in his prime and CeeDee Lamb.
Yep.
That's a fact. And he hasn't been the same since he's had that. But this Cowboys team, they have so much deficiencies on both sides of their line in their front seven. And they're so overly invested in skill position talent. They need they need linemen, they need linebackers, they need defensive pass rushers. That I think is what ultimately is going to fix that mess in Dallas. And like I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about this mock draft, and I'm like, I'm not sure today if I would rather be the Patriots or the Cowboys. I think I would rather be the Patriots today than the Cowboys with Drake May on a rookie contract. And I think the Patriots, even though they have a few glaring holes, I think the Cowboys have just as many holes as the Patriots, and they have like 90 million tied up in their cap in two players. So I think this Cowboys team is kind of screwed, frankly.
Plus a no-name rookie head coach that I seemingly was just plugged in out of desperation because nobody else was available.
Who is a journeyman coach that has never been a head coach with. It's Schottenheimer.
Yeah.
So I think what they'll do here, I think they go defense. I think this is where Mason Graham ends up. He's probably the best player available at this point. They certainly need help on the defensive line.
Yeah.
But, you look at that division right now. You got the best team in the NFL. You've got Jaden Daniels. And then I think obviously the Giants are nothing. But the Cowboys are in a tough spot.
They're in a very tough spot. And you know what? They might be at a point where they need a total reset, like honestly, and maybe that, we've heard about potentially shipping Dak out. I mean, would you be shocked to see Dak move on draft day?
I would be 0% shocked to see Dak move on draft day. I mean, the rumor was Cleveland a few weeks ago. It seems to have fizzled out. Yeah. But I like that move for both sides.
Yeah, I do too. I think the Cowboys, that's another team that, whatever window they had the last couple of years, when they were fairly talented, is closed. I actually think
their window is not just closed; it's like locked, hammered shut. It boarded up. Like they are so far away. I'll say it again: they're further away from a Super Bowl than the Patriots are.
I completely agree with that, and I could actually see a world where they finish last in the NFC East.
Yeah. Well, if they don't, it's only because the Giants are just that pathetic.
So, yes.
I mean, they just happen to have one of the worst teams in the league in their division.
Exactly, and I'll tell you, if the Giants do actually take Shador, I pick the Cowboys to finish last in that division.
Right. I don't hate that pick at all. I think it's a top heavy roster.
Yep.
That a team that has not been well built, and in this day and age, where there's so much cap room, to be able to put yourself into cap jail, you really have to make a lot of stupid decisions. And the Cowboys are a team that is truly restricted at this point for what they can and can't do because of the cap. And you just don't see that happening very much, where the cap keeps going up every year. Yeah. But the Cowboys did it because they've just overpaid for so many players. They don't like to say goodbye to their guys, and they don't want to bring in other guys. And it's like they've put themselves into a real corner. Yep. All right. Number 13, the Miami Dolphins. To me, this is my take. If I'm the Miami Dolphins, I would do anything and everything in my power to bring in Ashton Jeanty. I think he is the perfect fit for that Miami team for a couple of reasons. I'm going to tell you why. Number one, the coach is the best running game mind in the NFL. Mike McDaniel, he has turned mediocre or less running backs into stars. Give him a talent like Ashton Jeanty, and you will see results. Number two, the quarterback. We know he's good, but he's just not that good, right? Tua Tagovailoa needs Ashton Genty to take that Miami team anywhere. He's not going to be able to do it on his own. We've seen that the last few years. He will put up numbers. He will beat up on bad teams like the Patriots, and they will lose when it counts. To win with Tua, you need a guy like Ashton Genty. He needs to be the Saquon Barkley to Tua's Jalen Hurts. I think the Dolphins need to take Ashton Genty, trade up if you need to get him, but that is the kind of move that will take a middling franchise and elevate them a level.
Yeah, well, I mean, Genty and Devon Achane would be a hell of a 1-2 punch, right? Be almost very reminiscent of the whole Montgomery and Gibbs situation in Detroit, I
Right.
think. So yeah, no, I don't hate that at all. I got the Dolphins going defense. I have them taking a cornerback. I have them going Will Johnson. I think they're fairly well positioned in the front seven. But look, I mean, they're gonna have to deal with a budding Drake May, and they still got one of the best quarterbacks in the league in their division in Josh Allen. And I think their secondary is kind of where they're lacking right now. So I got them taking a cornerback. I got them going Will Johnson out of Michigan. But again, that's a team that I think there's a couple of holes that they could potentially be filling.
I mean, I just don't think that team's going anywhere if they build around Tua. I like Tua. I do. I think he's a good quarterback, but I just don't think he's good enough. And I think honestly, the biggest part of the problem is the coach. And they're just always that team that starts off strong and then falls apart at the end. So you bring in that stud running back when you have to go up and play in Buffalo, New York, New England, in December, in January, in November, that's going to be a huge tool in the toolbox that can help this Miami team actually win some of those games.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally would be. And I'm someone, again, I'm not super high on the Dolphins. I know the Dolphins kind of, a lot of people, the last couple of years have had high hopes for them. I'm not super high on them. I actually think the Patriots finish ahead of them in the division this year.
Yeah.
And I think they missed the playoffs again.
Agree. And I think this is Mike McDaniel's last year as coach,
Yes.
but I know they just signed him last year, but I think he's on thinner ice than we may realize.
Agreed, especially if they miss the playoffs again and finish third in the division. Yeah, I think he's gone.
Okay, Colts, Justin, 14. You got anyone?
Yeah, I think they go defense. I mean, they got good weapons on offense. You got Jonathan Taylor, bunch of good receivers, one of the better O-lines in football, and you're still trying to shake out what you're doing at quarterback. You got Anthony Richardson, who's a former top 5 pick. You got Daniel Jones, who's a former first-round pick. I think between the two of them, you're going to settle into something. I think they beef up the defense. I think they go in the secondary and they take Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia.
I don't hate that pick. I like them. I think they go offense here because I think there's so much uncertainty for them at the quarterback position. I think Anthony Richardson is a guy that could very well end up being benched this year.
Could be.
It was not a coincidence they brought in Daniel Jones.
Yep.
I think a lot of people, I look at Sam Darnold, I look at Daniel Jones, and I see in Indianapolis, and I see traces of what I saw last year with Sam Darnold in Minnesota. I think that's what the Colts plan is. If things don't go well with Anthony Richardson, to have Daniel Jones ready. Whoever's playing quarterback for that Indianapolis team, there's a lot of uncertainty at that position. It might be time for them to take a reset if things don't work out this year. I see them going with Ted McMillan here, who I think will fall a little bit because it just feels like he's kind of fallen out of favor, fallen out of the top 10, but I think he'll be available at 14. And I like him in Indianapolis, especially with a wildly inaccurate quarterback like Anthony Richardson. I think you need a big catch radius guy to maybe make a few plays. And Ted McMillan is a big guy. He certainly can do that.
Yeah. Well, that's they do got a lot of, they do got some talent at wide receiver, but the one thing they don't have is a big body guy. And that's what Ted McMillan is. So yeah, you're right. If you got an inaccurate quarterback, yeah, put a bigger guy out there, give him more of a chance.
And Anthony Richardson is historically inaccurate. Like, look at some of the advanced stats and numbers. He's bad. He's bad. I think that was a terrible pick, by the way.
Yeah,
when they did that a few years ago. All right. Anything else about the draft? I stopped at 14. You got any other thoughts you want to say or anything?
No, I just, I think that while this isn't a super top heavy draft in terms of like, having a bunch of guys that are just absolutely must have, can't misses, I do think, you have some decent talent that's going to fall into the back of the first round and into the second round. I think there's a bunch of noteworthy players that we didn't name in this top 14 that will still be on the board. And while they may not be superstars, I think they'll, you got some potentially very good NFL players still sitting out there.
See, I would like to know what you think about this, but I hear people routinely saying how bad this draft is. And I just want someone to go back and look and do an analysis. Is there really like tremendous variability when you take the draft, the 7 rounds in totality from draft to draft in the quality of players that comes out and trying to like correlate that with, the perception? I kind of push back on that narrative that this is a bad draft. It might not be a top heavy draft,
Right.
but don't tell me there aren't Hall of Fame players in this draft. Don't tell me there aren't all pro players. I guarantee you look back in 10 years, there are going to be plenty of great players taken in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, look, just a couple guys that we didn't even name, right? I've heard a bunch of people that say if Josh Simmons, the tackle out of Ohio State, didn't tear his ACL, he'd be far and
Right.
away the top tackle in the draft, generational talent, right? Guys like Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver for Ohio State, whose name we haven't
Right.
mentioned yet.
We
Like,
didn't even mention him.
didn't even mention him. Like, there's still, the safety out of South Carolina, Nick Manwari, the kid who's been shooting up draft boards because he's just an absolute physical and athletic freak back there, right? I mean, there's a lot of good talent that we didn't even name yet. I'm looking at some people right now. Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Missouri, he's rising in a lot of people's draft
Yeah.
boards. I mean, there's going to be some talent that sneaks their way into the back of the first round, into the second round, and it honestly might not be a bad draft if you're somebody that's in like the top 7 and you don't love who's available. Maybe trying to go for a 2-for-1 later in the back of the first or early in the second could be a smart move.
Well, that's where I think you're going to see a lot of movement on
Yeah.
Friday or Thursday, late Thursday, is teams trading trading back into the first round from the second round, or
Yeah.
when with those high second round picks. I think you'll see a couple of them moving up into the late first round when someone falls that they love, because there are a lot of guys in this draft that, yeah, it's not top heavy, but there are a lot of good players that are going to be taken in the late first round. In fact, one of the questions I was going to ask you next, and we can segue into this, is like, what else do the Patriots need to do in this draft? And one of the things that I was going to say when we got to that is they need to draft a tackle. And if you look at this board, there are going to be some really good tackles.
Yeah.
You just mentioned one of them taken late in the first round or in the early second round.
Right.
There's a lot. There's like 5 good tackles. The guy from Oregon. There's the guy from
Yep.
BC.
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons why also I would pass on Will Campbell if I was the Patriots, because you can get a really good tackle in this draft late in the first, early second round. Even if you stick and pick it in the second round pick, someone will be there, I think. And I think that those guys are going to be available. They're out there.
They are out there. That's really what this draft, I think, boils down to, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't have a ton of trade, or I didn't have any trades in the top 10, is because I really think if you're a team that isn't thrilled, um, with the talent in the first half of the draft, that you can kind of sit tight in the back half and kind of wait for something to fall to you, because something will fall, and then you have an opportunity
Exactly.
to trade back up.
100%
So
agree.
yeah.
100%. So let's talk about that a little though. I just said tackle. If you're the Patriots, where else do you want to go? They do have, I think, what, 9 or 10 picks. They got 2 third-rounders, or they got a second rounder. What else do they need to do in this draft besides what we've already discussed?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's any secret, but like I feel like the 3 positions we've heard them tied to, and especially in free agency, and they didn't really have a ton of luck. But they were trying to connect themselves to some big edge rushers, right? They were linked to trying to bring in Miles Garrett. They were linked to trying to bring in Max Crosby, right? They were linked to some big name receivers. So it's like, whether they go Abdul Carter or Tyler Warren at number 4, or whether they settle and take a Will Campbell, like, I think they still got some needs at edge rusher, in a receiver, and I think there's going to be a couple of good guys that you could creep back into the first round and get.
Yeah. See, I would say, assuming they don't take a tackle at 4, they need to take a tackle with that second round
Yeah,
pick and should probably try and move back into the first round
agreed.
to get one of those guys. So that would be one thing that I think they need to do. I would love for them to get a speedy wide receiver, like a Pop Douglas type. And I think those guys are going to be there in the middle rounds. So,
Yeah.
so that would be another one that I think.
Yeah, and that's a Abuka, right? And I mean,
Yep.
he's projected right now as a middle to late first round pick. Like that's plenty within the Patriots' wheelhouse to trade back up into that. You know.
And I'll give you one more. They absolutely have to draft at least one and probably two running backs. I am so down on Ramondre Stevenson.
Me too.
I have just watched two back-to-back years. Okay. In 2023, I watched Zeke Elliott be the best running back on the Patriots roster. In 2024,
Yep.
I think Antonio Gibson was the best running back on the Patriots roster. If Ramondre Stevenson is so great, then why isn't he the best running back on this roster in two back-to-back years? They just paid this guy a big contract.
Yep.
That was a big mistake, but it's not prohibitive. You can get out of that. I'm not saying Stevenson doesn't have a role on this team. What I'm saying is that Patriots fans have overrated him.
Yep.
He's not that good of a player. He's a solid, decent running back. He's not Walter Payton. He's not even close.
Yep.
And they need to go into this draft and draft a couple young running backs to take some of those carries, because Stevenson is not going to be a 1,500 yard guy. That's not what he is.
No, he's not. And we've been very critical of Stevenson for a long time. And I think there's a couple of good running backs that are still going to be available in the second, third, and fourth rounds. And, you know, there's a couple guys, guy from Ohio State, the kid from North Carolina. There's a couple of good running backs that are going to be available. And I think you got to go out and I agree.
And oh, by the way, you think what's going to happen when Stevenson coughs the ball up? You think Vrabel's going to tolerate the fumbling like Gerard Mayo did?
Nope.
No way. No way. So you need to have someone to go to and take those carries, because we know Stevenson, two things about Ramondre Stevenson. He fumbles and he gets hurt.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Confidence level in him is not high whatsoever. So I agree. It would be nice to bring in a running back, you know, in the early to mid rounds, not too early, but I think there's some good ones that you could get in the upper mid rounds.
Last question about the draft, Justin. Who's making this pick for the Patriots? And this segues into the Joe Milton thing, which we're going to talk about in a sec before we wrap it up. But is there any doubt that Mike Vrabel is the man making the decisions in Foxborough? I think it's shown clear as day from the second he came in here that Elliot Wolf can say whatever he wants to the press. We can have any structure you want for the fans, for the press. Mike Vrabel's the decision maker here. Everything they've done has reeked of Vrabel, right? From beginning to end, right? Even including the cutting of their trading of Joe Milton for a sack of potatoes 2 weeks ago. That was a draft pick of Elliot Wolf last year. Everything says Wolf is in control. Vrabel is in control. I think Vrabel is the one that ultimately has final say in this draft room.
The draft room might as well just be Vrabel in an intern to run and grab him waters. Honestly,
Right.
Like I think he has total full control over this draft, as he should. And I think again, it's one of the reasons why I'm sorry, not a reason, but I think it was probably a stipulation of his coming here was that he was going to have control over the drafting, because I think one of his big things in Tennessee, and I think you could kind of gauge this from some of his comments coming here and, you know, some of his comments when he was back at Tennessee, which is he really does believe that you need talent to win. Right. And I think one of his knocks in his time in Tennessee was that they didn't necessarily put enough talent around them. And I'm sure coming into New England, he told these guys, look, I can coach, I know how to win, but you need talent to win, and you got to let me go out and get talent. And I think that's what he's going to do.
Absolutely. And you can even look when Belichick started, and he wasn't technically the final voice in the front office. They still had Charlie Army, which is a blast from the past for y'all, you old Patriots fans like me. But Belichick, even though he wasn't technically the guy, he was clearly the guy.
Yeah.
Like everything they did in those first 2 years reeked Belichick. Right? Even, drafting Brady. I mean, they were so invested in Bledsoe, right? Why draft a quarterback? The cutting Bruce Armstrong and Ben Coates, who were great players here for a long time. The free agent class of 2001. It was all clear Belichick was making those decisions. It's the same thing now. Look at everything they've done this year. It's all so clear. This is Vrabel's show. Elliot Wolf is a bystander. And let me just say this, and if you agree with it, I think that's a good thing. I don't want Wolf or Macro to continue to have another bite at the apple.
I totally agree. Look, I have, until proven otherwise, I have all the faith in the world in Vrabel. And
Yep.
I think you brought someone like him in for a reason. You moved on from Gerard Mayo after 1 year for a reason. And if this guy's coming in, you got to give him the keys to the kingdom and you got to let him do his thing. I think, like you said, he's clearly been showing that that's the case so far in free agency, and I can't expect it would be any different on draft night.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk before we wrap it up about the Joe Milton thing because we really haven't recorded since that happened. In fact, that trade
Yeah.
happened the day after we recorded. So, so much for that being
Yeah.
newsworthy our podcast. But literally the next day they traded Milton. I don't know what your take is on this. I will just say this and then I'll let you go. To me, it's much ado about nothing. I don't think Milton was a needle mover. I do think they maybe could have got more for him, but this guy was a 6th round pick for a reason. Let's not be fooled by what he did against a bunch of scrubs in a team that was trying to lose in week 18. Joe Milton had a lot of flaws, and he also had a perception of himself that he should be a starter. It was a bad fit. This was not Drake May doing this. This was not, anything else. This was Mike Vrabel, again, realizing he did not want this guy in his locker room, mucking things up and making problems in the locker room for a guy whose perception of himself was so far out of proportion to his actual abilities as an NFL quarterback. Vrabel didn't want to deal with it, so he shipped him out for nothing.
Can I got to tell you, here's the one thing that annoys me about this situation. And I know you can say that, hey, you can't throw a game, you can't play to lose, blah, blah, blah. But for, this would be a lot different of a conversation if the Patriots had the number 1 overall pick, right? And, Joe Milton, for all intents and purposes, went out there against Buffalo in the final week and squandered away that number 1 pick for us, right? Imagine being
Yep.
able to move down and still get an Abdul Carter plus draft capital, right? Something
Right.
like that. Like that would be incredible. And so when I think about what showcasing him, and really it's that game that put him on the map and drove up his price, I think, in some people's mind, and kind of started that whole Joe Milton bidding war. That game cost us the number 1 pick. And to turn around and at least not capitalize on the perceived value that that game gave him, I was thinking that, they were at least going to try to flip him for like maybe a 3rd or a 4th, try to keep the asking price high. But, to your point, they kind of flipped him for a bag of balls. And I get the narrative of wanting to get him out of town before he becomes a distraction, not wanting to deal with it. But I just think in the grand scheme of things, what he cost us, I would have liked to see us get a little bit more for him on the way out the door.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I said it at the time after that Buffalo game. I think it was the worst thing that happened was him coming out and looking good because it just created a problem. I mean, I couldn't believe how many people I
Right.
would see on social media or you could listen to the radio, whatever, and people actually saying something like, Joe Milton should be the starter. We can trade Drake May or give Milton a chance. And it's like you already hearing those rumblings. Um, and at the same time, clearly the value for the player around the league wasn't there. Yes, I would have liked them to have gotten more for him, but I don't think that the market was there for him. And I think that says a lot. And at the end of the day, it just had to be done. He had to go because it would have caused problems in the locker room. He would have caused problems in the locker room. Because I can tell you what, at some point this year, they're going to hit a rough patch. Drake May isn't going to look good. And the last thing you need is this guy nipping at Drake May's heels doing backflips. I don't think Drake May isn't strong enough to handle it. I think he's more than capable mentally of handling that. I just think Vrabel didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze. Why does Vrabel want to deal with a locker room issue like that
I get it.
for a guy that is a fringe player in the league?
Yeah. No. I get it. I do. Trust me. I get why you wanted him out. I guess I'm just disappointed we didn't get more out of him. And I just, again, spilt milk, not going to cry over it, but imagine being able to get Abdul Carter through trading down and then still being able to move back up and get like a top tier tackle or somebody like that. But could have, would have, should have. But you know what? Look, he's out the door. He's gone. I think he's probably, got a chance to be a starting quarterback at some point in Dallas, either this year or next year.
Well,
So
because Dak Prescott gets hurt all the time.
gets hurt, and I could even see Dak Prescott getting benched at some point this year. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, I guess that's the end of the Joe Milton saga. So he was here just long enough to screw us out of the number one pick.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Screw us out of the number one pick. Joe Milton and Gerard Mayo, that will be
Yeah,
their legacy
yeah,
forever, is that they took away the number one pick. And
exactly.
it is a shame, I think, in a sense too, that Milton couldn't just that all this happened, because if you want a backup quarterback that like resembles the skill sets of your starter, I mean, I thought Milton and May were a good fit, like a Bledsoe Zolak type. Zolak was like a poor man's Bledsoe, and Milton might well be like a poor man's May. So I thought it was a good fit. So it kind of sucks that because of all the off the field stuff that it didn't work out.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I get not wanting any sort of issues in the locker room and in the quarterback room, but like I don't think it's a bad thing if a guy thinks that he's talented enough to play and wants to fight, and prove himself. Like, to me, that shows that you got a hungry guy who's going to work his ass off to be the best he can, and he's also going to hopefully keep your number one guy in check and keep a fire lit under Drake and say, hey, I got to bring it every day because I got a guy who's trying to prove it. Um, right behind me. So I don't know. I kind of see both sides of it, but yeah, I guess Vrabel didn't want to deal with it, and you can't really blame him for it.
Yeah, it's a fine line. You're right. I mean, you want to have someone that's confident and believes they can do the job, but I think also understands their role
Yeah,
on the team. And I think that second part is where the problem was
right.
with Joe Milton. He didn't, it didn't seem like he felt like he really understood what the franchise looked at him as. All right, one last thing around the league, 2 minutes before we wrap it up. We haven't talked about a lot of the things going on elsewhere besides outside of the draft we did. I just want to briefly mention Aaron Rodgers, Justin, probably the last big name free agent yet to sign anywhere. The story gets bizarre and bizarre. He opened his mouth today, said some really strange things. If I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't want him. I mean, there's got to be someone else out there that you can sign. Maybe they're a sneaky team to move up and draft a Jackson Dart or something like that. I don't know, but I mean, I don't know why anyone would want Aaron Rodgers at this point. I really don't.
Well, what did he say today? I didn't hear his comments.
Oh, he just went on Pat McAfee show and just like talking a lot about, just hasn't, I won't do it justice if I try to emulate it, but basically the take home I would say is he has an overinflated opinion of himself at this point.
Got it. Yeah. Well, you know what? Good for him, I guess. But yeah, no, I'm not the biggest fan.
Yeah. It's just time to walk away. All right, my friend. Anything else? Yeah, before we wrap up this episode of the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots podcast.
No, that's it, man. I'm excited. It's going to be interesting. I think, for the same reason that people are expecting this draft to maybe be like a little boring in the sense that there's not a ton of top tier talent. Like, I think that could also create a lot of unexpected moves. I think you could see players getting traded. I think you could see, a ton of moves that we're not expecting. I think you see a ton of teams trading back up into that back of the first, early second round. So I actually think this is going to be a little bit of a better draft than maybe some people are anticipating, and just even in terms of entertainment value.
Yeah, I agree. I think there'll be a lot of trades on draft night. I really do, for the reason you just illustrated. When franchises will fall in love with guys, and when they fall, teams will make moves. Everyone's just kind of waiting to see, because there's so much uncertainty in the top 5 of this draft. There's a lot of years where you basically know the first 3, 4, 5, 6 picks for 3 months beforehand. I mean, even last year, I think we nailed maybe 5 of the first 6 picks. Everyone knew who was going. You can't say that this year. Like, no. I mean, you have so many guys, I think, that could be taken in that top 5 or 6. It's a total wild card. So everyone's going to wait back, see who ends up actually getting picked. And when teams that fall in love with guys, those guys fall, I think teams will be aggressive and make moves.
Yeah. Yeah, be very, very interesting, and see what the Patriots do. But you know what? It'll be fun to watch. And the first pick of the Mike Vrabel era is upon us. So I'm curious to see what he does with it.
Yeah, I'm just glad Belichick's not making the pick because that would be like boring. Trade
So
down.
boring. Yeah, we keep
Will
dreaming
Campbell,
that.
something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, exactly.
Belichick's lost his shit, by the way, in North Carolina. Like what is going on with this guy in Jordan? I mean, can I make a Jordan Belichick
Yeah, yeah,
prediction?
yeah.
All right.
Please, yeah.
She is going to screw him over so hard. Okay. She's going to end up having an affair with one of the football players that's her age,
Yeah,
age
seriously,
appropriate,
yeah.
I might point out, down there. And it is going to be high drama. There is no way that something that goes on, that something like that won't happen at some point. I'm sorry.
That's a ticking time bomb, honestly. I mean, like, I think everybody kind of sees it for what it is. I'm glad Bill's having a little bit of fun, but for a guy who spent an entire career being super, calculated, under the radar, etc. This is just like a totally like out of left field move for somebody with his like personality type and his kind of, I think, just characteristics. Just yeah, it's very entertaining to me to watch, but I think it's gonna go up in flames at some point.
I think it's sad. Like, I really do. Like, can the 73-year-old guy, can you just be like, I'm not saying like don't get out there and date, but like 23 years old, I just think there's something so like, I don't know, it's so out of balance for both of them. It's just like it just feels wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Every time I see a picture of the two of them together, you just kind of cringe a little bit, you know?
Yeah. They
Yeah.
don't look good together. They
No,
don't look right together. So you got
no.
this gorgeous 23-year-old former cheerleader prancing around in knee-high boots and like, skimpy tops, right? And all these like young 22-year-old football studs and alpha males. Like, it's a setup for disaster.
Big time. Big time. But that's what, that might be the most entertaining narrative of the North Carolina 2025 season, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really. I mean, I'm rooting for Belichick. I want him to win. I want him to be successful, build a program. But this off the field thing is just like become the story. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Anything else, my man?
No, that's it. Just yeah, looking forward to the draft, and can't wait to recap. It's gonna be interesting.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank everyone that listened. Hope you enjoyed our mock draft here on the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots podcast. Have a great week. We'll see what happens next Thursday night, and we will definitely be recording another episode shortly after the draft next week to discuss whatever it is or however this all shakes down. We are looking forward to it, and we'll be ready to talk about it. Have a great week, everyone. Be good, and enjoy the spring weather coming.